I'm Anthony Lacavera. Over the last 20 years as a founder, CEO, tech investor, and TV host, I've had the privilege of building relationships with incredible individuals that are driving positive impact globally. Trailblaze brings you these conversations with innovators across all walks of life who are carving through uncharted territory with new and unique approaches to design and build a better future for our world. Trailblaze highlights their personal journeys with stories of resilience, business and personal challenges, and the wisdom gained through the eyes of these leaders who are striving to challenge the status quo. Let's get into today's episode.
Well, in LA, we got in a Mustang convertible and started driving around with the milk, and
yeah, that's right.
I remember that. Yeah,
that's the first time I met you. I think.
Yeah,
that had to be like
probably 2004 or five. Yeah, five. Yeah.
We were younger men then.
Yeah. And I knew you had like style and energy because you flew in when you came in. All of a sudden, we're going for a ride, and you got the convertible in LA. I mean, that's awesome. Yeah.
Do you ever spend any time out in LA these days?
No. I mean, I have a colleague there, like at Techstars there. We have a full Techstars, and I lived in San Diego, and I've been down, but not no.
Where's the Techstars in LA?
So they just moved it. It was in now I think it's in Venice, or in Silicon Beach, that kind of area. But I actually don't know the address. They just moved to a new kind of nice spot, probably a WeWork.
Yeah. Speaking of Venice, man, it's awful.
Venice,
it's just, honestly, man,
homeless and crime,
horrible, destroyed. Yeah, there's got to be. I'm not shitting you. There's got to be 5,000 people living out on the boardwalk right now, and there's fights out there. You know, my buddy's scared to take his dog out for a walk because there's just it's just. And they did this thing where the LAPD can't do anything. Yeah, right. They completely neutered this whole defund movement. Okay, it's honestly one of the, to me anyway, one of the stupidest things that has happened in a long time. Yeah, and so now sadly, you can't even really. Yeah, even in my neighborhood in LA in West Hollywood, it's kind of no.
So you still have a home there?
Yeah. And it's kind of you know, you feel the different energy. It does not feel like it felt like the safest place before, but it doesn't anymore. Yeah, sadly.
Yeah. Actually, it's interesting. I didn't realize you still spend a lot of time there. We have we have also the Techstars Music in LA.
Oh, cool.
So there's this guy named Bob Moz, he's known as, and we work with all the labels like Sony and all the big labels that they're the partners for this Techstars. It's all music tech. So you just like music media. Yeah. A lot of artists, lots of and they I think they're co-located with the LA Techstars. I think they're in the same spot.
Well, what was your motivation to start to getting involved in Techstars? However long ago that was now, 5-6 years ago, right? And bringing it to Canada. What was the impetus for that?
I think it's because when I had the idea to do something in the entrepreneur space, my idea at the time was to copy what I thought Techstars was, because we didn't have anything like it in Canada back then. So when Extreme Startups, that accelerator, it was kind of modeled on what I thought Techstars was, mentor-driven accelerator, batch-based, investment, equity, top caliber mentors, global network. So we built that, and I think that was back in 2012.
And that was with Ray Sharma, right? That whole group, right? Yeah.
And we had 5 VC funds as investors, which was the strength of the program. And then I think also the weakness of it, how it kind of went away quickly due to just, different views and personalities and whatnot. But it had a great start, and that was kind of built on what the Techstars model was. So it was a little bit of a hack of that. And then after that, when I joined one of those venture funds that was backing it as a partner at Extreme Ventures, I always thought that really what should happen in Canada with all the innovation and the smart people and the livable cities is we should bring that Techstars actually to Canada. And so my goal was to sort of lobby for it. And it took me at least a couple of years of sort of soft selling the idea that Toronto deserves a Techstars. And so when the kind of decision was made, I thought, well, this is great. At the time, I thought I'm now just brought my biggest competitor to my own market, and it's going to be a challenge. But the idea was that I'll kind of apply for the job, and if I got the offer, I'd leave and take a turn at running Techstars. So it's been great for me.
When you think back to the diplomatic government days for a second, and what you learned in that era, and that's when we first met in LA. We were talking about what were the biggest things you learned in that era that have been so relevant
Yeah.
and helping you make such a large contribution to the innovation ecosystem like you are now in Canada? I mean, between Collision and Techstars, I mean, you got two of the biggest names globally that you are responsible for bringing. Right. So what part of the government history helped you do that?
I think the biggest part was the fact that I was posted to California. So I was, it was a great honor to represent Canada in any jurisdiction of the world, any part of the world. But my diplomatic posting was in Southern California. And at that time, in like the mid 2000 decade, it was really at the height of the tech boom. Like things really started happening all around me in terms of, tech companies and entrepreneurs just launching great things, and how I was just inspired by how fast they moved and how big their ideas were. And I had a unique point of view because I was representing Canada to all these big companies in the US, and I would be able to get meetings with CEOs and sort of, position the opportunity that Canada might bring to these companies, whether it's for talent or just a market partner, or potentially for an expansion of these US companies into Canada, into cities like Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal. But what it kind of let me see was this, rise of entrepreneurs and people doing great things, and they were able to see results of their work so quickly. And I think felt a little bit of jealousy that the work that I was doing, although it had a lot of benefit and value, it wasn't really something where you could see outcomes as fast as you'd like. And you weren't always clear that you're actually making an impact or making a difference, because, it's government. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and process and calls with Ottawa and all of that. So I really thought, life is short, so I've got to find a way to make a change. And, I don't think jobs are meant necessarily to be forever. And the whole reason I was in this foreign service and government of Canada in the first place was, I think, just a random event. Like it was just a decision I made at a certain moment, and it just kind of went down that path. And
from early on in your life, you didn't think you wanted that path?
No. I used to pretend to be a diplomat when I was in high school and university through Model UN. And then I think when I was in my graduate degree, my master's degree here at University of Toronto, I just saw a recruitment poster for, joining the government of Canada and into the Foreign Affairs Department. And I thought, well, I used to, pretend to be a diplomat, so this is my chance to do it for real, right? So I went through, all these application steps and interviews, and I got the offer. So that became my career path for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that part of your history. I did, because I sort of entered your life where you were already full blast in that. And I think I just assumed that was always like what you envisioned doing. But what a big change to then do what you're doing today. And in terms of Collision and bringing them and that whole organization to Canada, which has been an amazing success as well. How did you go about doing that?
So Collision was a conference that I used to attend. So I love events. I think, I feed off people, and I use it as a way to kind of just, learn more than anything, meet entrepreneurs and listen to speakers. And so I had been going to Web Summit, which is the big event that is part of Collision in Europe. And at the time it was in Dublin, and I would go, year after year, just, by myself and buy a ticket and started to, meet some of the people behind it. And then shortly after, they started Collision in Las Vegas first, and I went. And after a couple of years in Las Vegas, it went to New Orleans. So I realized this conference company, although it's based in Dublin, it's very global, and it has a habit of moving around, from city to country.
And Lisbon, right, has been kind of now.
It's now in Lisbon, right? So I had just, made a recommendation to Patty Cosgrave, who I had met at a couple of, they started to include me on some of their events and whatnot at the conferences. And I made a recommendation that Toronto would be a fantastic city for Collision. And I kind of explained why. It's a big city, bigger than people realize. There's so much tech happening. There's great entrepreneurs, lots of immigrants, and lots of smart people are choosing to live in Toronto from all over the world. And it's a great city for a big event. And so then, to my surprise, they kind of thought that's interesting, and they started to create like a process where, which city really wants Collision. So we created a little bit of a groundswell of support here, and that the city got behind it, the mayor of Toronto and many of the stakeholders. Patty flew into Toronto one day. I remember he actually just tweeted from the airplane. And I was sitting in my house just working, and I saw he either tweeted or made a Facebook post that he's about to land in Toronto, and who should I meet with? So I simply wrote to him and I said, listen, how about I pick you up from the airport, like in 30 minutes?
So cool.
Yeah. So he said, sure. And I just picked him up and we went straight to Mayor Tory's office because that was his first meeting. So I just joined him. And I remember after that meeting, which was a kind of an explanation of how, important an event like Collision can be for any place that has it. The mayor looked at me at the end and said, okay, Sunil, so your job for the next 2 days is to show this man the best time possible in Toronto so we can, get this conference. So that's actually what we did.
So what did you do? Where'd you take him?
Well, all the spots, like from, I think it was the Drake and King West and, just driving around, looking at venues, looking at the, obviously the Intercare Center. And I threw a party on the rooftop of Extreme Ventures where I was working at the time. We had a rooftop deck like you have here, and you might have been there. It was just kind of a pop-up party and entrepreneurs.
I try not to miss parties. Yeah, that's one thing we have in common.
Yeah. So he had a good time. And I remember when we were driving into the city from the airport, we were talking and he stopped, mid-sentence and he's looking at the city skyline. And he said, Sunil, I had no idea that this city was this big. He had never been to Toronto before. And it really took him by surprise as like how big a city it is, especially as you approach.
It still has that reputation, right? As being it's sort of a northern outpost. You hear these, I hear people talk about it. When I say to people in the US, like, look, this is the number 4 urban center in North America. People are like, what?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How?
Right. Bigger than Chicago. Yeah. And I always tell my American friends, I have lots of colleagues in the US that, Toronto's a bigger city than Chicago. And
like, what?
Yeah.
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 Well, and so much more diverse in so many ways, to your point. That stat that I always love to tell people, that more than half of Torontonians are first generation Canadians, and so many more coming, and our immigration policies continue to be so important for the growth of the country.
I literally just told that stat to a New York Times reporter, Cade Metz, like 10 days ago. He was writing a story. It just got published on the rise of Toronto's tech ecosystem in the Times. And he said, Sunil, like, is that really true? Like, where can I verify that? Well, it's like where the city talks about it. And so, yeah, it was in the piece.
So when you think about, Sunil, like bringing more great tech to Canada, you started to talk a little bit about Africa. So how did Africa become part of your journey?
So really, it was just a Techstars application. So now I'm working at Techstars and, investing in startups. And we don't have any like geographic restrictions on how we invest. It's really just find the best startup founders from any place in the world. And there was this company from Lagos, Nigeria that was kind of a fintech company. And I was just intrigued by their business model. I had no introduction to them. No one referred them to me. But I started to look up the CEO online a little bit, and I saw him do a couple of talks on YouTube. And actually, interestingly, I haven't thought of this point in a while, but he had a background in the UN as well. He had done something, spoke at a UN conference at some point, and it was on YouTube. And I just thought this person has quite a presence and very articulate and has a big vision. So we just connected and started talking. And he also felt that Canada was an interesting place for him personally, and had a family member in Toronto. So it's like, again, when I see that, I think, okay, there's already a relative, there's an awareness, and there's potentially that we can make a match, like where it's like just a value for all parties that, in Canada can make sense to this fintech company in Nigeria. So they joined, and they were a real, credit to our program. The company's called CoraPay. Yeah. And like all tech companies, it's had its ups and downs, but I can tell you categorically, it's on an upswing right now. It's a really well-known fintech across Africa, a payment technology company.
Yeah. And I feel like you introduced me to them, actually. I think when I was visiting you, I think I met them. I met the founder.
Right.
And
There was two gentlemen here, Dixon Nosifor and Brian. Were the two co-founders that came to Toronto and took part in Techstars. Yeah. Dixon now lives in Toronto. I was talking to him in the lobby of your building, actually. But what's amazing is this company is based, for all intents and purposes, in Africa. Like that's the market. That's where all 90 of their employees, and he's telling me it'll be 200 employees by the end of next year. Awesome. But the global headquarters of the company is right here in Toronto. So we have one of the fastest growing fintech companies in all of Africa, headquartered in Toronto, with the CEO actually living in Toronto and running his company, remotely, with lots of travel and people being hired here and there. And I just think this is like a great way to do business.
Well, you started talking a little bit about other African countries too, because I'm hearing more and more about how much the innovation and tech ecosystems are evolving and how quickly in Africa.
Yeah.
And so I think I heard you say Kenya as well, but how are you thinking about expanding your presence in all those places?
Yeah, so an interesting thing has happened, which is that certainly Africa is digitizing, and there's entrepreneurs are just taking form, and there's businesses launching constantly, and money, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of capital being invested in these companies from investors all over the world. What we're doing is we're seeing even more deal flow, as you know, as an investor, where the deal flow that's coming from Africa is sensational. And I think it's cumulative. I think it's because early companies like Corapay, which led to another company the year after called Quidax, which happens to be the second or third largest cryptocurrency exchange in all of Africa. And that's one of our Techstars Toronto startups as well. And so it's a headquartered company here. And that led to some mobility companies like Trips and a talent company like Talent QL. And so the ball started rolling. And what I noticed is that a lot of the top entrepreneurs and investors in Africa are aware of Toronto, and they're seeing that there's this potential of getting an investment from a small fund in Canada, and it can be of high value to the company. Yeah. And I think part of it has to do with Canada being like a country with an incredibly high country brand.
Yeah.
And that maybe is where the circle gets completed with my diplomatic background, because I was basically a representative of Canada, like from a lot of years, being kind of a salesperson for the whole country. And I can see that there are a lot of strengths that we have. And now maybe in the entrepreneur space, we're starting to see some real ways to take advantage of our country brand and quality of life and attract founders.
Yeah, and we're still understated. I mean, and you know that I wrote about this in my book. Like, I wish we had more salespeople like you and many more people that were out there really promoting how great a place this is to do business, but we still don't. You're still the exception, right? I know you know that. Like, it's just not in our nature here, right? To talk a lot about how amazing we are. And I understand why. I understand no one wants to be over the top, boastful or anything like that, but there's just so many great things to talk about. I wish we did. I wish we did more of it. I feel like we're starting to do it. Yeah. And with some of the great success stories we've had here, it's starting to happen more and more, but still, I think a lot more needs to happen.
Yeah.
When in Africa, for what I've seen so far, we've looked at, companies that are coming out, there just isn't the kind of robust incubator accelerator ecosystems yet. What do you think has to happen there? How did it happen here, and what has to happen? What do governments need to do there to really kickstart that in a better way?
Yeah, I think that problem is taking care of itself now with the amount of money and the early stage investors that I'm very impressed by. What we would call angel investors here. I'm very impressed by how African entrepreneurs are investing, and investors are investing in founders. And I think it's, in fact, entrepreneurs themselves that have had some exits or had some success. There's companies like, Paystack that were acquired by Stripe a few years ago, created quite a bit of wealth for some early founders.
Right.
There's big tech companies like Jumia and Flutterwave and Andela that are
so they're starting to give back.
Yeah,
they're starting to get back into the equity.
And I think they actually the people who were part of those companies and still are, I actually think they are more active investors than what we see here with some of our founders that have seen success. And also they don't create angel groups for the sake of them. I don't see the same thing with angel networks like being formalized. It's just through informal channels, relationships, quick decisions on investments, syndicates led by people that are in the know. And now, like you asked, there are some accelerators starting to take shape there, including, I'm happy to say, Techstars. We're starting one very soon in Lagos. And I think partly it's because the Canadian Techstars has had some success and activity with African tech startups. And so we're going into the market. But I will tell you that there's no question some of the big names in investing like Y Combinator, SOSV, they're very actively investing in African tech companies already from their, using their existing models.
Yeah, and you keep centering on Nigeria. So I guess maybe that's kind of my question is, what is Nigeria doing that other African countries should think about doing to attract the Techstars and Y Combinator's of the world. And in terms of Legos, I've been hearing so much more about it that I actually started talking to my partner Michael, that I do the Bloomberg show with. We're going to go to Legos in next season because like we're just super excited about it.
I wish I knew more. Like, I feel a little bit unqualified to even comment because I'm sitting here in Canada. I don't have, a personal background in Africa at all, but I guess Lagos is, such an incredibly large city. Nigeria itself, I read that the population of Nigeria will surpass the population of the United States by the end of the century.
Yeah, it's well over 300 million already.
Yeah. And I think the hustle and the business speed that entrepreneurs work there, I'm very impressed by it. They have some challenges, government regulations and the uncertainty of government, especially we've seen that in areas like ride sharing and mobility, like the motorcycle Uber, that was a big issue. Cryptocurrency and digital money is under a lot of pressure. There's been some decisions by the Central Bank of Nigeria that can be quite concerning to investors and companies, but then on the other hand, they seem to, find ways around things and maybe launch in other countries and kind of look at the legal, conditions in maybe Ghana or Kenya, and so I feel like things are moving in the right direction, but African entrepreneurs are very resilient. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, during our Zoom calls, there's full power outages and issues with just connectivity.
Yeah, some challenges that we don't ever even think about here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, which makes for a great entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah,
like
no
if you can overcome that. The only thing I see in my professional life that takes this whole resiliency to another level would be the startups in Ukraine, and if you can imagine like how challenging that must be to not only build your company but to survive for your life, we've had a couple of investments in companies from Ukraine, one in Kharkiv and one in Kiev, and of course the first priority is keeping in contact and hoping for their safety, and also but what I'm seeing is there's the founders are still very much trying to build their companies, which is just incredible.
Right. Yeah. But it's really, I think, creates an opportunity. We should, as Canadians, be creating opportunities for them to come here if they want to. Yeah. And I know you've been really active on immigration policy and issues and visas for entrepreneurs. You've brought people from all over the world already. Mm-hmm. What can we do sitting here today to help people that want to come here?
Yeah. Well, I've been trying it. To be honest, it hasn't been easy. Even with the Ukraine crisis aside, we have good marketing, I think, on immigration openness and programs like startup visas and fast track immigration for talented people. I don't necessarily think it's working entirely well. And in fact, I'm seeing other countries raise their game. And I have firsthand some examples of entrepreneurs that were planning and hoping to come here. They invested a lot of money to set up their businesses here, and they're just always waiting.
Just hasn't materialized.
No, and I think
sort of not as advertised kind of thing.
Well, there are some areas where it needs improvement. I think on the one hand, we can attract, and the desire on their part is to come, and we can make these connections with organizations that have networks around the world and people that are wanting to bring startups and build companies like in tandem into two jurisdictions. I think that makes a lot of sense, but the speed of these visas, because ultimately these people are like you, they're entrepreneurs. They're not going to wait around. They're not motivated primarily to live in a place like Canada, right? That's not what's driving them. Yeah. They're motivated to build like
solve the problem that they want to solve.
Yeah.
And we'll go where I need to go to solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we really have to understand that. And I'm of the view that I don't believe,
you've had a lot of success though, haven't you? Just helping shape those policies. Like you've been such a vocal advocate. Where do you think it's falling down?
Well, I think partly there's an industry around immigration, and I think partly it's become clear to a lot of companies and people that this you can make a good amount of money off of creating programs that are kind of purposed on building maybe tech startups, but also where there's a business model attached to some aspects of bringing people over. And I that can do a few things. One is it can potentially violate some rules. Secondly, it could jam up the system and it's not necessarily clear that the best startup founders are going to make it in, and the ones who are going to actually create wealth in Canada versus people who are just, really wanting to be here.
Right.
And it also can, in some cases, destroy the startups themselves if these companies aren't structured properly with investors and with proper, with true co-founder structures. Then, unbeknownst to the founders, they may never have a viable company, because investors like you won't be able to invest in companies where it's not a proper ownership structure with true founders.
Yeah. So those types of challenges, though, I mean, feel to me like we just need to get on top of it, like, because there just is so much great talent globally that would like to come here, that would like to come to Canada, and we're just and we talk about removing barriers, but then certainly in my own experience in my own portfolio, as people have tried to come here, it's not nearly as easy as it should be. So I feel like, I don't have the background to understand why that is, but it feels to me like we need to improve it.
Sure, totally. And also, we're competing. This is a competitive game, and I actually I'm aware firsthand that the U.S. Congress is discussing this very way to bring in top tech companies to the United States quickly. And I actually think their model will be very different than ours, and the kind of outcomes that they'll see will be quite different.
Interesting.
And so
how are they thinking about it differently then?
Well, I don't think the details are fully out, but I think they're basically building it on the a model of investors. So the organizations that are bringing or wanting to kind of sponsor a visa or bring a tech company, they're actually investors, like equity investors in companies. And they have, it's a opportunity for that investor to outcompete another investor from another place and offer not only the investment and the network, but a potential green card to the U.S. quickly.
Interesting.
And so that, but on our side, we can outcompete on other things. We should be able to outcompete on our livable cities and our quality of life and our openness to immigration and safety of in some places. We talked about Los Angeles a while ago. We have a lot of advantages here, but ultimately are they going to get their visas? Are they going to get their ability to come here and take the reins of companies that they've in many cases already gone to the process of incorporating in Canada and have bank accounts in Canadian banks with money?
Can't get here.
That
has to stop. Shifting back to the Ukraine for a second, I don't think I let you finish your thought. I mean, it's just amidst the tragedy, people are still trying to stay there, but many are trying to leave. What do you think could be a path for us to help those amazing, just talking about, forget about people generally for a second, which obviously this is a industry-wide, a multi-industry, population-wide issue, but for where you and I kind of are active in tech, what do you think can be done to help the teams, the dev teams, the families that are part of the tech industry that want to come to come to Canada? Is there some simple things the government could do or that we as an industry could do?
Well, what I did read from IRCC, our Federal Department of Immigration, and Minister Fraser made an announcement of a very, I think, a very generous and fast process to immigrate Ukrainians that have an interest in moving here. So from what I read, that's actually quite positive. I sent it to the startups that I have in Ukraine and said, if this is of interest, I fully support that. I don't know, it's probably a heart-wrenching experience to leave your own country in any circumstance, and for all the teams to necessarily, potentially leave would be sad on some levels. But as long as we can get to a point, and hopefully soon, where it's a safe.
Well, and people don't want to split up either, too, right? Like you have some people that really want to, some people don't. But then they're saying, I'm going to leave my friends now too, and this is my home. And
but I think it's proven again, if as tech investors, like you and I are, at the early stage, it's really about the entrepreneurs, right? It's about the people. And again, if you can just imagine on the word resiliency, how resilient entrepreneurs must be in a country like Kiev or a country like Ukraine and a city like Kiev where we have a company, how resilient they must be to be able to, move forward with the business on
top the middle of a war.
Those are the kind of entrepreneurs that you should definitely want to trust with your money, and hopefully investors will not shy away from the companies that they're already, in talks with, and maybe will in fact look for companies there. Because I think it's a smart place to invest. It's a country which has foundational math and science, incredibly smart people, already had a lower operating cost in comparison to most places in Europe. And so those are really good conditions for startups. And hopefully
and just very high quality talent.
Yeah.
Very smart, very hardworking, high quality. I've been always from my own portfolio so impressed with how hardworking, smart, diligent, thorough, thoughtful.
Your partner is a well-known Ukrainian, right? Bryce. Bryce, that's just,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, incredibly hardworking people. But I think in the middle of the tragedy, like that's happening right now, it's just, I think the onus is really on us to try to proactively do as much as we can. I have a really good friend of mine named David Jeffrey, who's currently driving around in Poland near the border and driving Ukrainian refugees to safety. He rented a bus because he, back in an earlier life, knew how to drive a bus, and so he's literally driving people to safe places, safe shelter. I just feel like stories like that are so powerful at this moment when people step up and do things like that. So I am trying, and I just have not had success in figuring out the path that I can easily show people to be able to relocate here, because you run into those personal issues of, I'm leaving my friends, I'm leaving my family, I'm my parents, my cousins, like my home. Am I really going to uproot myself and go to another place, or am I just going to, power through this? So it's not an easy answer, right?
Yeah. And I think the neighboring countries like Poland and, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, there's going to be potentially a lot of talent that's going to resettle in countries nearby. And I think those ecosystems are already strong.
Oh, Warsaw is already an amazing ecosystem. I was there last year and visited some incredible startups. And then you have all the big tech companies with significant presence there. And
I went there too. It was actually my last trip before the pandemic. After Web Summit, I made a little trip through Eastern Europe looking for startups. So went to Latvia and went to Poland, and I actually even went to I went to Lithuania and also Belarus, which interestingly is I often think about that little visit of a couple days in Belarus, and I don't know if I'll ever end up there again, but the talent in those cities, but also the cities. What great cities are Warsaw and Krakow and Vilnius, Lithuania. I was just thinking, and just remarkable. And I really hadn't experienced that before, but it's a great place to invest in entrepreneurs.
Man, and look, Estonia. Speaking of like progressive, right? Talking about crypto, right on the forefront of that smart city infrastructure. I was interviewed a startup that's from Estonia that's talking about with the government rolling out a true comprehensive smart city infrastructure, right? And so they're thinking so progressively. We think of these places as like a little bit legacy, old European kind of, but they're not, right? They're very forward thinking.
And they're attracting talent, as we talked about before, like the e-visa in Estonia is world renowned. And founders will go there from all parts of the world, from India, from South America, from the United States. They'll end up and they'll build great companies, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's what the world needs.
Sunil, what do you think about the next few years of where the tech world's going to go? Metaverse, AR, VR, real-time applications, immersive, crypto, NFTs,
all of that.
Okay,
right? All of it. Yeah.
What are you excited about?
So way above my pay grade to really understand and critique the industries themselves. I mean, I again bias more on the founders and what their commitment is and tenacity is. But at the same time, industries obviously matter, and what the fit is for what we do here in Canada. So like digital health is really interesting. We have a lot to offer with single payer healthcare system and ways to roll out really interesting innovation to large.
We say that, but do we really?
But do we? Yeah.
We say that all the time. We have all this data. It's in one place. It's not fragmented. But I don't know. I mean, are there startups really able to access that data? Is the question, right? And use it.
We haven't had much success on this. I think you're right. I'm talking high level and it looks good on paper, but I do believe their desire is to to adopt these innovations.
And University Health Network's extraordinary. I mean, with world-class research, world-leading research in so many ways.
I guess in fintech, we're obviously behind the times there as well with open banking and all, but there's a lot of talk about it, a lot of need, recognition that we have to, become more progressive and compare, and especially when you compare other countries. But we are a big banking center, and there is a lot of fintech companies here that seem to be doing well, growing, raising money, whether it's in the crypto and blockchain spaces or in traditional disrupting banks on things like payments and wealth management and equity trading and all of that. So It's a good place for it. Toronto, again, like really unique. I think the best example of a city anywhere in the world where you have this equal balance between banking and finance presence, expertise, like decision makers, and software engineers, right?
Yeah.
Lots of smart people who can code or can design. So you have it all in one concentrated city, where the banks, from the banks, you can walk to the university. Like that's not always the case. And to
rarely.
This level. And I don't think you see it in New York like this, in London, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and some of the other financial centers. So it makes sense that fintech could happen here. However, there is pressure from incumbents to stop that, right? So there is the pressure to kind of not allow this full, liberalization of tech.
Well, my favorite story about that is Paul Desmarais III, self-disrupting with Simple, right?
Right.
What an amazing
Right.
story, right? The incumbent self-disrupting. I think it's like, doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so to add to that beautiful mix is just the market. We're never going to be a huge market country, right? 38 million people. It's incremental growth. Even with immigration, we're not going to be like a big population center for the world. So that's why the places like India, Africa, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those countries where you have billions of people consuming, it's a great recipe for partnership. And the market that you have there, if there's a way to, it's sort of tricky. I even have trouble like articulating how you do it. But if you can combine the networks and the cities in a way that you have access to the large network, but some of the technical expertise here and relationships with large companies like banks, you have the potential to build like really great things for the world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about automotive as a future for Canada. We've got so much expertise today in assembling an automotive, some great battery technology leadership, and of course, a lot of autonomous leadership. So I'm hopeful that in the next 5 or 10 years, we see a couple of Canadian car companies emerge with hybrid autonomous electric vehicles, purely electric vehicles. There's no reason why we can't have a Canadian car designed, built here for export.
Sure. Yeah.
I really don't understand why we don't have that already. I mean, when you think about the level of expertise we have, even just in Southern Ontario, right? I find it personally as a Canadian offensive that we're assembling cars for Toyota, Honda, Ford, GM, Chrysler. Why aren't we designing and building for export? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, it even made me think of yesterday's announcement of the battery plant in Windsor. Huge announcement, a lot of money, $5 billion. I read. I was thinking that, okay, what's the startup angle to that? Like if you were a tech investor, really early stage, or an entrepreneur, like it might be smart to go there. That's your new spot. Take advantage of all this investment and innovation, and maybe there are some peripheral tech companies or product companies like in transportation mobility that could be built in the shadow of all of that.
No question.
With leveraging it.
Agreed.
And then probably a positive for the region, for Windsor and the Detroit corridor. It makes sense. It's right across the border from the big U.S. auto center.
And then energy. I'm excited about our prospects in energy too. We're such a great energy exporter today. We get a bad rap, I think. I think the Alberta tar sands get a very bad rap. They're an anchor to this economy today, and we're a big exporter today. But there's so many clean energy technologies being built out in Africa. In Alberta, that I'm particularly excited about that for our future. I think we do it ourselves a disservice by sort of always knocking our energy industry, right? We're negative on it, but it's
and maybe that's a silver lining with the all the hostility we justifiably have towards Russia, that maybe this is going to become like an opportunity for Canada to show its strength, and maybe some of these pipelines and other things will be done again. And
I hope so. Hope so.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Trailblaze. Would love to hear from you. Tweet me or comment on LinkedIn or Instagram and share what you took away from this episode. This show was produced by Creator Club Studios. You can start creating today at creatorclubstudios.com.